Hey everybody, this is Games Plus James, and welcome back to our single screen platformer devlog series. You can see some gameplay of the game and what state it's currently in on screen at the moment. It's been a little over 6 or 7 weeks since the first devlog video, and I've been super busy working on tutorials and new courses, but I've also been working away in the background on this game. And one important thing to mention is the game now has a name, and that name is Scoot Kaboom and the Tomb of Doom. I think it's a lot of fun to say. It's just a fun little series of words to go along with a fun game. So along with the name, you can also now wishlist the game on Steam. It'll be released a little later this year, but if you have a Steam account, wishlisting the game really helps a lot with Steam's secret behind the scenes algorithm to get the game promoted and stuff like that. So even if you can't necessarily afford to purchase the game when it comes out, which it won't be super expensive, just adding it to your wish list costs nothing and really helps the game out. But enough pitching though, let's dive into some details of what I've been working on for the game since the last devlog. So I've been steadily adding new mechanics to the game in general, so one of the first things I did was add a new projectile weapon that fires from the wall. You have to avoid it and trying to survive without it destroying you, which obviously is a lot of fun. But at this point also, I was starting to think about some of the overall design of the level and how things are going to start when you start the game. So I worked on adding this kind of intro sequence. So you start off in the top left, it shows the bottom right corner, and then it reveals the whole rest of the map. And the idea is you can start running around, and the game eventually, once I get around to it, will automatically zoom in to start off in the first area, but you can obviously switch between being zoomed in and zoomed out as you want to. So with that done, I then moved on to adding in some colored backgrounds, because the kind of dull black background was kind of a little bit boring at this point. So we wanted to add a little bit of variety and also a way to kind of distinguish between the different areas that exist in the game. I knew what I was developing, I wanted to be able to see things a little bit more clearly, so this kind of helped sort that out without having to go too crazy with the tiles just yet. And at this point I was starting to think about what the name of the game actually was. So obviously we know it now that we're talking about it in the devlog, but at this point I was like, I really need to decide on a name for this game. So I have known it for a little while, but yeah, so this was when I started thinking of that. So I went ahead and added a menu into the game full of things bouncing in and sliding around and different stuff in the background, so we could get a general idea of the theme. Now you might have noticed that this is not the same logo that we showed at the start of the video for the game, and that's because making logos is hard, and I was making it way more complicated and hard to look at than I needed to. It looks okay on the screen here, but when it's shrunk down really small, it's very hard to read what's actually going on, and so it didn't look great when you put it all together in that way. So with that done, I moved on to making a few improvements that are a little bit harder to see. Well, one is that I switched to making all the spikes and things like that work on a fixed timer. They were kind of all operating on their own time, which could lead to some weird errors. Some of the mechanics are still working on their own times in the current version of the game, and I need to fix that up, but I know how to do that. It just needs to be done at some point. So you can lead to some weird errors, but you should also notice on screen here, there's a load of motion blur happening because we added some motion blur when it zooms in and out, and also at the edges of the screen there's a bit of kind of effects to make it all look a little bit more interesting when you're playing. It was around this time that I went and started creating the Steam page. I can't show any footage of that because I don't think Steam really wants you, or Valve really wants you showing their behind the scenes stuff of how that all works. So I can't really show any of that right here, but know that, hey, this is when I was setting up the Steam page. So when I was doing that, I also went ahead and added a screenshot system into the game, so you can just take screenshots when you're playing by tapping on the keyboard. Again, that's not something you can really show on the screen here, but maybe I'll show up a screenshot. Wow, isn't that amazing? I also wasn't really happy with the logo quite yet, so you can see I made a slight change to the logo on the title screen. It's a little bit more squashed together, which worked a lot better than the previous one did, but still very hard to read when it was made smaller. But we moved on from working on the logo screen. I knew I wanted to do something else with that, but we jumped ahead a little bit and added some actual gameplay stuff into the game. So I added more into the projectile weapons section for you to run around and jump and avoid as you were going. I also made it so the teleporter section, which is the next section of the game, had teleporters that connected up in terms of their color. So one color would connect up to another. So it made it a little bit easier to know which teleporter you're going to go in or out of at any particular time. I also, for fun, added a frames per second counter in the top right of the screen so I could get a good idea of how the game is performing and making sure there's no weird kind of hitches. Now, obviously, on my quite strong computer, it runs very, very well, but I also wanted to test this out on some my laptop and stuff like that, and it runs perfectly fine everywhere at the moment. Obviously, we'll see how that goes as the rest of the game develops. So at this point, I was getting a little bit sick of just looking at those plain pipes the whole time. So I've tried to make a tile set, I tried to use a tile set. This is a tile set I found online just to use as a placeholder to get a better idea of how the game could look with a better tile set than just some pipes. So it helped get a good feeling of what was going on. You can see I also changed how the teleporters looked. So now they look like actual real things. And I also filled out this whole area here full of teleporter traveling around mechanics to jump around and challenge the player to run around it. I also started work on the next section, which was to have these opening little platforms that you have to open as you go. They're a little bit small here, but obviously this is not the final art or anything like that. But it was good to be able to start working on the next section. So as I was playing around with the character and stuff like this, I started to get an idea of, hey, maybe I could try make a slightly nicer looking player character. So I decided to kind of double the resolution of the player, essentially. And I really liked how it turned out. It's much more of a cartoony looking thing and less of a pixel art character, although it is still pixel art that I'm using for the character. I kind of liked how it turned out, so I decided, hey, I'm going to go with this look, which obviously would then mean that I'm going to have to upgrade the various mechanics around the level. You can see at this point I've made some changes to how some of those items look here. But I've also added some things like particle effects to the teleporters at this point. Always trying to kind of improve things a little bit, but a lot of that polish and stuff like that is going to have to come a little bit later in development to make everything look perfect together as we go. I also filled out this whole crumbling, shaking block section with a little bit more difficulty and a little bit more interesting mechanics to try complete this whole area as we go. And obviously at this point, when I upgraded the player and started upgrading some of these level mechanic, the graphics of all of them, this simple tile set starts to really stand out as not looking that great. So I went and did some work and created an actual tile set that is most likely going to actually end up in the game. Something that is a bit more representative of what's going on. You can see the starting area is most likely where this tile set will be in the game. Now obviously the background and stuff like that is all going to change. This is all just very placeholder background stuff, but it's also a little bit bright here, this background. But I really like how the different tile set looks. So I was quite happy with how that turned out, especially with the new player design and stuff like that. So I'm happy to be upgrading things and making things feel a little bit better at this point. But as I said, that background was a little bit too bright, so I darkened down the background, and then also I went ahead and added tile sets for the entire level into the game. So at least the entire level so far. I haven't made tile sets for the area that hasn't been made yet, for example. But we've got a rough idea here of how the tiles are going to look. There's probably going to be a good bit more work done on them, but the basics of them are there, and it helps to be able to identify all the areas of the level a little bit better. I also worked on making our splatters look better too, because they were at the lower resolution we had before, so I improved them, and I also made it so that the splatters don't repeat colours very easily. There's I think there's like 20 colours that they could possibly be, and so they won't repeat colours until it's used all 20 of them basically. So it'll repeat. It should mean that you won't get the same colours appearing over each other as you go, because I saw that happen a few times with the old system and it didn't look great. And if you're a bit eagle-eyed, you should also notice in the bottom right corner I added in the new logo, which is the current logo, the final logo of the game at the moment, in the bottom right corner, just to get a feel for how that would work. I was obviously at this point thinking about what that new logo should be, and I had been playing around and settled on something that I thought was a little bit more interesting than the previous logo. So with that done, I went ahead and added that new logo into the title screen of the game, did a little bit more work on the title screen to make it look a bit more interesting as well, and I'm pretty happy with this for the moment. Obviously, the title screen is not final or anything like that, but it does the job for now, and I'm perfectly happy to be able to use that just to be able to play the game and work properly. So with that done, I went ahead and added a new section into the game and a new mechanic, which is these standalone spinning saws for you to avoid, so they're leading onto a whole new section of the game after the little crumbly bits that we have before. So this was a fun little tool to work on. You can see I also worked on adding some text that pops up when the character dies, which is a lot of fun. I also went up to these teleporters and gave them unique symbols as well as different colors, because if you're colorblind, obviously it can be a bit hard to see different colors. So each one has a unique symbol on it to say, hey, even if you can't necessarily tell the colors apart, there's a symbol on each matching pair of teleporters that you can identify where each one goes to as you play. So with the spinning saws as well, I also added in this kind of laser mechanic for you to avoid. It works a little bit better than the projectiles do, for example, because they shoot out all the way and try to destroy the player. So it's a more instant kind of kill mechanic. And with that new laser mechanic done, I went and had a look at how that text effect was looking when you got killed. I wasn't super happy with it just being one color, so I made it so that it will have random colors every time it appears, and it's a little bit offset from the character and rotates at different angles and stuff like that. So it's a little bit more interesting and just adds a little bit more extra kind of flavor into the game and makes it feel a bit more cartoony as well. And at that point, I was pretty much done. That's exactly where we are in the game at the moment. There's a lot of cool stuff that I have planned to work on at the moment. A lot of behind the scenes stuff too, like for example adding good controller support and things like that. But all of that is to come. We're going to have more of these devlogs coming up in the very near future. I want to make these a little bit more regular. This one took a little bit longer to do because I got swamped doing a whole bunch of other tutorials and working on new courses and stuff like that. But the game is a lot of fun to work on, and I really can't wait to get it out for everybody to play. So as I said, anyone who can wishlist the game on Steam, the link will be down below in the description, of course. But if you can wishlist the game, that really helps the game out and helps it get more noticed and gets more people playing it, because ultimately I want to see people play this game and see how much fun they can possibly have with it. So as I said, I'll be back soon with more tutorials, more devlogs, and as always, keep being awesome.